Hello and welcome. It's 10 a.m. on Thursday, the 26th of June. You're tuned into our mid-morning newscast here on ARIRANG TV. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. High-level government officials from South and North Korea have just begun their first face-to-face talks in 6 months on matters related to the management of the joint Kaesong Industrial Complex. For the first time ever, a Chinese warship will be joining US-led naval drills for the world's largest international maritime warfare exercise, dubbed RIMPAC, that begins Thursday off the coast of Hawaii. Plus, at the World Cup in Brazil, Argentina wins a thrilling game against Nigeria, who also qualify from Group F. Despite the defeat, France and Switzerland advanced to the last 16. But our top story this morning is closer to home because officials from the two Koreas are holding talks on ways to improve the management of their jointly run Kaesong Industrial Complex. This is the first time, in fact, the joint committee in charge of running the park has met since December of last year, when inter-Korean relations soured a deal, quite a big deal, following military drills between Seoul and Washington. Departing for the industrial park earlier this Thursday morning, the South Korean delegation said the meeting was an opportunity for an overall review of how far they've come with the normalization of the business park. A number of issues will be up for discussion today, including the installment of internet connection and an electronic entry system. The world's largest international maritime warfare exercise, dubbed RIMPAC, begins on this Thursday off the coast of Hawaii and will last for 5 weeks. Nothing that unusual about that, you may think, but this year has an added edge, as a Chinese warship will be joining the US-led naval drills for the first time ever. Shin Se-min has this report.
For the first time ever, Chinese naval ships will be firing gunshots off the coast of Hawaii inside U.S. maritime territory as part of multi-nation naval drills. The biannual naval exercise, dubbed RIMPAC, begins Thursday with a total of 23 countries taking part. 4 Chinese ships, including a missile destroyer and more than 1,000 Chinese military personnel, are already in Hawaii. The friendly exercises come amid tensions as Beijing continues to assert itself in its maritime disputes in the East and South China Seas, while Washington seeks to reinforce its influence in the Asia-Pacific region. U.S.-China relations have also been strained by U.S. claims of cyber espionage by Beijing. China rejects Washington's accusations. The U.S. government says it invites China as a means to ease tensions and boost naval cooperation between the two countries. In a recent report to Congress, the Pentagon said it would continue to monitor China's evolving military strategy, doctrine, and force development while building the foundations of a stronger military-to-military relationship with Beijing. China's attitude towards the U.S. has softened within the invite. In the run-up to the drills, China's deputy naval commander touted the importance of the world's two superpowers establishing stronger military ties. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Now we have some news just coming in. The presidential office says Jong Hong-won, the current prime minister, who said he wanted to resign a couple of months ago, will continue in his role as prime minister. This comes after the president's previous 2 picks to fill that spot actually had to withdraw their nominations prior to confirmation hearings for various reasons. We'll bring you more details on that story in our next newscast at 12 noon Korea time. Now, there are still more questions than answers about what exactly led a 22-year-old South Korean conscript soldier to open fire on his fellow troops, killing 5 and injuring 7 others, this over the past weekend. Defense Minister Kim Kwon-jin did his best to share the latest findings with lawmakers at the National Assembly on Wednesday. Our Ji Myung-gil has this report.
At a special Q&A session at the National Assembly on Wednesday, Parliamentary Defense Committee lawmakers lashed out at Defense Minister Kim Kwon-jin over last weekend's shooting spree, asking why the sergeant, who had been on a watch list for special attention, had been on the front line.
I don't understand why the military deployed soldiers needing special attention to frontline units.
The suspect had been receiving routine personality checkups since he entered the Army. He passed the evaluation test last November, and that is why the military deployed him to the outpost. We are trying to find if there were any procedural problems.
The sergeant was scheduled to be discharged on September 16th, pointing to two other shooting spree cases in 2005 and 2011. Lawmakers asked about preventing recurrences.
What kind of measures have you been implementing so far after the previous shooting spree cases?
We have been making investments to upgrade the military culture within the Korean Army. We also have an inspection team from the Defense Ministry that routinely monitors and audits the Army units.
The conscript soldier was taken into custody Monday after trying to kill himself. After undergoing surgery for the self-inflicted gunshot wound, he is now in stable condition. A note written by the Army sergeant before his attempted suicide didn't provide an explanation for why he went on the shooting rampage that killed 5 of his colleagues. The Defense Ministry has set up an investigative team of 48 military officers to determine the motive for the attack. The team is currently gathering statements from Im's colleagues and victims' families amid speculation that bullying may have played a factor. Kim Young-gyun, ARIRANG News.
Said that a team of South Korean...
Get connected to Korea and the world. Join us every weekday for the latest developments out of Korea, Asia, and beyond. On air, on your mobile, and online, we lead the way every day. ARIRANG News.
To try and resolve the crisis in Ukraine, the European Union also offers $15 billion. More than 70 high school students who survived the Seoul ferry disaster returned to their school in Ansan, south of Seoul, on Wednesday, 71 days after the awful tragedy. Most of the second-year students had been attending group psychotherapy at a training center in Gyeonggi-do province. The students wore yellow bracelets with a message reading, "Remember 0416, the day of the sinking." Giving a speech on Wednesday, a student representing the survivors said all they wanted was to go back to their ordinary lives and for people to treat them as if they were any other 18-year-old. A parent of one of the students asked the Korean people to never forget the ferry sinking. Now, although consumer sentiment is seeing slight improvements across the country, domestic consumption in Korea remains rather sluggish following the Seoul ferry disaster. It's against this backdrop that the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry released a report suggesting some new ways to breathe life into the economy. Our Kim Ji-yeon has this report.
The Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry made suggestions for improving business climates in Korea to keep investment and jobs in the country. In its report released on Wednesday, the chamber said excessive regulations prompted many Korean businessmen to build factories abroad. Last year, overseas investment by Korean companies accounted for more than 27% of the investment at home, triple the amount 9 years ago. The chamber suggested the government should introduce new regulations gradually to give local businessmen time to adapt to changes, such as extending the retirement age, expanding maternal leave, and reducing working hours. It also calls for tax breaks and other incentives for companies relocating factories to Korea from overseas, saying the U.S., Germany, and Japan all offer such sweeteners. The chamber said deregulation was necessary in the service sector, including tourism and the medical industry. To attract some of the 100 million Chinese who travel overseas every year to Korea, it said the government must simplify the visa process and take steps to expand accommodations and pool of service professionals. It also urged the government to allow hospitals to set up for-profit subsidiaries to accommodate the need for medical tourists. The number of medical tourists visiting Korea is around 1/10 the amount that go to Thailand. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
The number of newborn babies in Korea spiked in the month of April. Statistics Korea said on Wednesday that more than 37,000 babies were born in that month. That's up nearly 2% from a year earlier. This marks the biggest jump in 17 months. Childbirths in Korea had been on the decline for 13 straight months before February. Policymakers have been trying to boost the nation's chronically low birth rate over concerns it will have an effect on the nation's future growth. Now, before it is too late will be the theme of a shocking anti-smoking campaign that hits the airwaves here in Korea on this Thursday. It features a man in his 40s smoking a cigarette with a stressed expression on his face. You are seeing the advert now. A close-up shows a blood vessel bursting in his brain, and then the man recovering somewhat in a hospital bed. The Ministry of Health and Welfare hopes that this graphic video can help bring down the country's high smoking rate. Last year, Korea's smoking rate was second highest among OECD members, barely trailing Greece. Now, June is an important month here in Korea because it is designated to remember the patriots and fallen heroes who made the greatest sacrifice for the nation. Well, President Park visited a cultural exhibit to highlight the importance of preserving cultural heritage in protecting one's country. Also marking a monthly Culture Day on Wednesday, the President looked around a number of Korea's national treasures. This includes the UNESCO-listed Hunminjeongeum Haerae, which were protected during Japan's colonial period by a man known as Kaesong. President Park praised Kaesong for his efforts to protect the Korean people's soul through cultural heritage preservation, adding that Koreans have a duty to pass down their cultural assets to the future generation. From actors to sportsmen to government officials and even researchers, dozens of people from around the world have been invited by Korea's Culture Ministry to Korea to help build a global network by taking part in its Cultural Partnership Initiative. Our cultural correspondent Park Ji-won tells us more.
80 people from 40 different countries will explore Korea for the next 5 months as part of the Cultural Partnership Initiative program run by the nation's Culture Ministry. Participants will spend that time at 16 different host organizations, including the National Theatre of Korea and the National Kugak Center. Participants will take part in diverse activities from performance to research.
As a Taekwondo player, instructor and a coach in my country, this is a very good opportunity because Korea is the main part of the Taekwondo, heart of the Taekwondo, especially Kukiwon, and I'm really happy to be here as a CPI member.
I'm a theatrical performer. I make sound with my body, sound effect, for example, and I play talking drum as well, traditional drum. I believe I'm going to explore so much in in South Korea.
I came to Korea for research Korean music and culture, and next 5 months I will be in Jeonju at Intangible Cultural Heritage Center for Pacific and Asia region.
Since 2005, nearly 900 people have participated in the annual cultural exchange program. It aims to enrich cultural diversity and build networks among global experts through the sharing of their own cultures. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
And a good Thursday morning to you all as we continue on with our 2014 Brazil World Cup coverage. Now, 4 matches took place earlier today, this including Nigeria, who hope to advance to the next round after facing off against Argentina. So let's take a look at the highlights. Now, it didn't take long for the first goal to be scored as the great Leo Messi scores in just the 3rd minute of the match. But less than a minute later, it's Ahmed Fares Musa answering back with an equalizer, and it's 1-1. Now, both players would score again later in the match, but it's Rojo in the 50th 50th minute, who gives Argentina the 3-2 lead and the win, but Nigeria still advances to the next round. Next up, Bosnia-Herzegovina taking on Iran. Now, people thought this was going to be a boring match, but this match full of goals, including Edin Dzeko, who scored in the 23rd minute as Bosnia-Herzegovina easily took this match 3-1. Now, meanwhile, over in Group E, Ecuador needing a win against France in order to advance to the next round, but this match ends in a 0-0 draw, giving Switzerland a golden opportunity. And with that, Switzerland going up against Honduras, it's Xherdan Shaqiri scoring not once, not twice, but 3 times in the match for a hat-trick, giving Switzerland the 3-0 win as they advance to the round of 16 after finishing second in Group E. And of course, tomorrow Korea will be facing off against Belgium in their final group stage match, hoping to win big in order to advance to the next round. So how does the Belgian team look? Well, let's take a look at their strengths and weaknesses. Now, of course, taking a look here, Belgium is a very well-rounded team. They score well from the right side with Eden Hazard leading the way, and they score well with set pieces, something, once again, Korea has a hard time defending against. And their greatest is their defense, and they didn't give up a single match where they gave up more than a goal during the World Cup qualification matches, so definitely a strong team here. But taking a look at their weakness, though, they're terrible at defending at the wings. In fact, out of the 32 nations, they give up the most goals to wingers, and at the same time, they tend to lose focus on the defense late in the match. Now, most of the goals they do give up tend to be at the final 15 minutes, and they also have a hard time scoring late as well. And now finishing things off, Luis Suarez has got himself in trouble once again after biting Giorgio Chiellini during Uruguay's 1-0 win yesterday. And now he might be facing another suspension, this time much longer. Now, FIFA has requested that all the evidence of the incident be sent in as soon as possible. And according to several reports, Suarez can get up to 2 years in suspension if found guilty. Of course, this isn't the first time that he's bitten an opponent. In fact, it's his 3rd time. His last incident coming in over a year ago when he bit Bronislav Ivanovic in the arm and was suspended 10 matches. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Time now for a look through the international headlines we're following on this Thursday morning. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim standing by at the news centre. Good morning to you, Eunice.
Hello, Mark.
Now, in Iraq, the embattled Prime Minister there has rejected the idea of forming a national emergency government in light of the continuing and intensifying sectarian fighting there.
That's right. There have been calls for Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki to step down as he had been blamed for poor governance that marginalized minority sects that stoked the fire for the insurgency that we see unfolding today. But he flatly ruled out that possibility of forming a national emergency government, warning that such calls represented a coup against the Constitution and an attempt to end the democratic process. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, who is in Brussels for NATO talks, urged Mideast nations to hold their fire. This as U.S. and Iraqi senior military officials confirmed Syrian warplanes had launched airstrikes in Iraq, likely against ISIL militants who had joined forces with the al-Nusra Front, al-Qaeda's affiliate in Syria at the two countries' border. The move is significant as it opens the way for militants to further firm their grip on both sides of that border. An explosion at a busy shopping plaza in Nigeria's capital city of Abuja has killed at least 21 people and injured at least 17 others. Police were securing what they described as a crime scene, though it was yet unclear who or what was behind the blast. Eyewitnesses described scenes of chaos at the city's Woo's district. Body parts scattered, people covered in blood, and smoke billowing in the area. Cars outside the complex were burned out and windows shattered. The BBC reports the shopping district was packed with people at the time. Western nations are warning they have more sanctions in store for Russia unless Moscow acts further to de-escalate tensions in Ukraine. Following a meeting of NATO foreign ministers, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry urged Russian President Vladimir Putin to publicly call on separatists in Ukraine to lay down their arms. While applauding President Putin's request to cancel a law that would have cleared him to launch a military intervention in Ukraine, Kerry said that could be, quote, reversed in 10 minutes. Officials also said German Chancellor Angela Merkel and French President François Hollande spoke to Putin and Ukraine's President Petro Poroshenko on the phone for an hour Wednesday to urge them to work together. The Barack Obama administration has lifted a ban on U.S. oil exports that had been in place since the 1970s. The U.S. Commerce Department approved 2 Texas-based companies to ship a type of lightly processed crude known as condensate to buyers abroad, which can be turned into gasoline, jet fuel, and diesel. According to sources familiar to the case, the shipments could begin as early as August and are likely to be small.
Good morning to you. I'm Lee Ji-hyun with your weather updates. Well, it was misty this morning, but as the day goes on, it should burn off and clouds will be sticking around throughout the day. So overall, most parts of the peninsula can expect to have another muggy day today. And monsoonal front is moving northward and Jeju is being affected by the front. So people in Jeju could expect to see 5 to 20 millimeters of monsoon rain in the morning hours, and sporadic showers are in store in mountainous regions in Gangwon-do and some parts of Gyeongsang-buk-do later in the day, while the rest of the country can expect to have partly to mostly cloudy skies. And here is the weather outlook for here in Seoul. Lots of clouds will continue to dominate for a while, and it looks like outbreaks of rain can be falling during the day on Saturday. And today should be as hot as yesterday, so let's take a closer look at those temperatures. Well, morning low here in Seoul started out at 19, and behind the capital in Gwangju will rise to 29, while Daegu will soar to 32, and Busan should make it to 25 later in the afternoon. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like down on Jeju and Dokdo should see a high of 24. Daejeon will reach 29, while Mount Keungang tops out at 20. Well, that's all for now, or that's all for Korea, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
OK, before we go, a reminder that President Park has decided to retain her Prime Minister Jong Hong-won in that role. He, of course, had offered to resign in the wake of the Seoul-Ho ferry disaster to take responsibility for the government's perceived and heavily criticised response to that disaster. This comes as President Park's previous two nominees didn't even make it to the confirmation hearing. They pulled out before then, so she's had a very difficult time filling this spot. And once again, then, Jong Hong-won will be retained as Prime Minister. It goes without saying that we'll be bringing you more details on that and the reaction to that in our next newscast at noon Korea time. Until then, goodbye.